G'day guys, the World Eaters Codex has been out for a while now, and one of the most common questions that I get asked is where people should start when building a World Eaters army and what detachment they should build around. So I thought what I'd do today is give you guys a detachment tier list video. In this video we're going to break down each detachment in detail. We're going to talk about how it feels on the tabletop and how to decide which detachment you want to play. Then we're going to talk about the best enhancements for the detachment, which ones are worth taking and which ones are a bit of a waste. Then we're going to talk about noteworthy stratagems. We're going to talk about which ones are worth their CP cost. We're going to talk about which ones are a waste. And we're also going to break down how to get the most out of those stratagems. We're then going to follow this up with a breakdown of an example list from every detachment. We're going to break down the units that go within these various lists and how to pilot them on the tabletop so that you can get started and hit the ground running with your World Eaters. And then once we've broken down all of the lists, we're going to place each one of them on a detachment tier list. This is going to basically rank them from most to least competitive in a tournament setting. So with all that being said, let's jump into today's video.
Look for the blood god.
Alrighty guys, let's hit the ground running with our first detachment, the Cult of Blood. Now, this detachment's play style, the way it's going to feel on the table, is all about attrition and control. This is about controlling the objectives, and by having these big, annoying, tough units that are very hard to chew through, so you're basically going to take minimal casualties over the course of the game, and you're going to be able to outlast your opponent, right? It's all about recycling those large units of jackals that are durable because they're going to have feel no pains, they're going to have invulnerable saves, etc. And you're basically going to have lots of bodies with a lot of OC, so you're going to be able to control those objectives, and then you're also going to be able to distract people and block people and prevent them from doing damage to your bigger pieces within your army, and those bigger pieces are going to be focusing on doing damage, etc. So that's the sort of play style. So if you like that kind of way of playing the game, then this detachment's for you. Some of the best enhancements available to the Cult of Blood are the +1 toughness and the 5-up feel no pain, which is really, really powerful on a demon prince on foot. And then there's also an enhancement that allows you to redeploy jackals and goremongers. This is really good because it allows you to put, say, 3 units of goremongers out into the midfield, preventing your opponent from scouting, preventing your opponent from infiltrating their stuff. And then at the start of the first battle round, you can just pull them all back into your own deployment zone so that you're not sacrificing them with no good reason. Whereas every other World Eaters detachment without the ability to redeploy, you're going to put them out there, they're going to achieve their goal of blocking scouts and infiltrates, but then they're very likely to die in the first turn. So this enhancement kind of just gives you an additional 3 units that you would otherwise have sacrificed. There's a few noteworthy stratagems that really play into the playstyle of this detachment. One of them is that you get to reroll hits on big units of jackals after an idol dies. So after one of your big monsters dies, you'll be able to go, cool, against the target that just killed it, I get full reroll to hit. Now reroll hits is really, really good. It's rare in the World Eaters Codex, and with our ability to have sustained and lethal hits active, being able to reroll hits and fish for those additional 6s means that even something as soft as a jackal can actually put significant hurt on bigger targets. One of the other stratagems that's really good is just reroll on hits on the jackal unit as long as they're within 6 inches of an idol. So very similar, the concept of getting those sustained and lethal hits, very, very good. But this one doesn't require one of your idols to die. Now this one you only spend it on 1 unit as opposed to getting it army-wide against that one target. So there's pros and cons to this, and those 2 strats kind of work in tandem. Another really core one, and this one I think is somewhat of a defining stratagem for the detachment, is recycling a dead jackal unit. So you can take a unit of 20 jackals, you can send it out, and when it eventually dies, you can spend command points to bring it back to life and put it back into reserves, meaning you can bring it back on. And this is why I say that this detachment's playstyle is all about attrition, because while your opponent's spending all of their resources trying to kill your units, you're just bringing them back. You're going to grind them out over time. It doesn't have massive explosive damage, but it does grind your opponent out. There's also a stratagem to get a 5-up feel no pain on jackals, and it's worth noting that the detachment rule does allow you to put a 4-up invulnerable save on your jackals. So that makes these jackals toughness 4 with a 4-up invulnerable save and a 5-up feel no pain, that's really quite tough. And when you have a 20-man unit and it's sitting on an objective somewhere, it's going to be very hard for your opponent to shift you off that objective. And then even if they do manage to shift you off, you're able to just recycle them for command points. So again, leaning into that attrition and control playstyle. Now, the last stratagem worth mentioning is that you can have a second round of the 4-up invulnerable saves. And that's another way of basically going, cool, you've killed my jackals, I'm going to bring them back, and then I'm going to spend command points to put that 4-up invulnerable save on them again, and really just grind out your opponent. So let's jump over and have a look at an example list, shall we? Alright, let's have a look at the Cult of Blood list. So this is just an example of a list that I've wrote. Feel free to modify it and adapt it to your preferences, but we've got a Demon Prince of Khorne here, and he's got the Brazen Form, which gives him that Feel No Pain and the plus toughness. We've got a unit of Goremongers, and then we've got 2 units of 20 Jackals. So these are the big units. You're going to be recycling these guys, you're going to be buffing them, you're going to be making them tough, etc. Then we've got 2 units of Chaos Spawn. These guys are fantastic for early trades. You can send them out and attack smaller targets without exposing your big Jackal units. We've got a couple of Hellbrutes with the Hammers and the Fists. I actually think this is one of the best data sheets in the entire codex, so you'll see these guys consistently throughout every list in this video. But the Hellbrutes are an absolutely fantastic unit that's going to do a lot of work for you. And then we've also got 2 big Khorne Lord of Skulls. Now, the reason we've got the Khorne Lord of Skulls in there is they project that idle aura, and they project it further than anybody else, which is really, really exciting. And they also increase the probability that you're going to get that Dev Wounds, because every time they kill a unit, you can roll additional dice on your blessings, and the Dev Wounds really dials the damage output of those Jackals up. Because often, the Jackals being relatively tough, when they are hitting something that's a bit harder, they're going to be wounding on 6s. So if you have Dev Wounds active, well, you're going to be wounding on 6s and doing Dev Wounds. So it really deals with the fact that the Jackals are low AP and struggle to chew through those harder targets. So the Lord of Skulls help facilitate that. And then they're also a really chunky, tough, hard-hitting damage dealer in their own right, which can help pick up some of the slack of the Jackals. And then you can also use those Jackals to sort of create bubbles and screen and prevent people from engaging with your Lord of Skulls unless you want them to. And that way, you're not going to just get alpha striked and deleted early in the game. Because you go, cool, the Lord of Skulls is here, but I'm going to place the Jackals here, which means that you can't charge the Lord of Skulls, which means you can't kill it easily. Things like that. So it leans into that sort of attrition and control playstyle where you go, cool, I'm sending out these big units. They're hard to kill. The Lord of Skulls is hard to kill. Nothing in this army is a soft target, with the exception of maybe the Spawn. But even they're annoyingly hard to kill. So it's just it's a grinding sort of army list. But with all that being said, let's have a look at where it fits on the tier list. Alrighty, here we have our tier list, and the Cult of Blood is going to fit in down here at D tier. Unfortunately, I think this detachment, it leans into an attrition and control playstyle, but that's not the World Eater's strength. And a lot of the World Eater's data sheets don't really lean into that. So even though the detachment itself is trying to push you in that direction, I think that that's more of a Necron kind of playstyle, and I don't really think that that fits the World Eaters. So unfortunately, because there's that disconnect between the detachment's playstyle and the faction's playstyle and the data sheets that the faction has access to, I think that disconnect is causing this detachment to fall into a D tier. But with that being said, let's jump over into our next detachment. Alright, next we're going to talk about the Possessed Slaughterband. Now, this detachment is really exciting. What we've got here is a detachment that's all about damage and power. You know, it's got huge buffs on your damage output on your units, and it has just an emphasis on raw power. It's not particularly tough. It doesn't have a ton of tricks. It doesn't really play that attrition game, but the amount of damage that this detachment does is unparalleled. It's very, very strong. This is so realistically, if you're an aggressive player and you want to be able to just send in things and just absolutely mince your opponent, the Possessed Slaughterband is a really great detachment for you. The best enhancements are, there's one that gives 5-up critical hits to your units, which is fantastic. We were talking earlier about the Jackals and how reroll hits is really good when you've got sustained or lethals on a 6-up. Well, getting it on a 5-up is kind of like getting that rerolls built in, right? because if you have a 1 in 6 chance, re-rolling it into another 1 in 6, that's kind of the same as having a 2 in 6, which is kind of the same as a 5-up, right? So the 5-up critical hits is really, really powerful, and it applies to his whole unit. So now you take that unit and it goes 5-ups. Every 5+ that you roll is giving you an additional hit, or it's giving you a lethal hit. Really, really deadly units. And then there's another enhancement that I quite like, which is basically every time you kill an enemy unit, you roll a d6. On a 4-up, you gain a command point. Because this detachment, some of the stratagems available to it are quite expensive. So being able to generate additional command points is very, very good. Some of the noteworthy stratagems for this detachment. There's a -1 to wound on your 8-bound units. That's really, really good. There's a +1 damage on your 8-bound units. Now this one is regular 8-bound, get it against anything non-vehicle, non-monster, and exalted 8-bound, get it against vehicles and monsters. So you want to have a mix of those units, but being able to push those entire units to 3 damage, and then putting 5-up critical hits on top, these guys kill almost anything. They are absolute monsters in melee. So that's really, really good. Other noteworthy stratagems are you've got Fight on Death on your 8-bound. Now, you might think this is a bit odd because the detachment, so the army rule has a 4-up Fight on Death as an option. So why would you want a stratagem to Fight on Death? And there's a few reasons. One of them is that this happens guaranteed. You don't have to roll for it. So you know that if you've got that 6-man unit of 8-bound with a Slaughterband attached to it, and somebody goes in and you know that their activation is going to kill the whole unit, you can just spend the command points, and now you know for certain that your entire unit's going to fight on death. You don't have to pray for the 4-ups, right? So that's really, really good. And there's a few interesting things that when you fight on death, you're not actually selecting a unit to fight, and there's certain stratagems that means you can get around. You know, anytime there's a stratagem that says when your enemy unit is selected to fight, you can -1 damage, or you can, you know, Armor of Contempt or things like that. A lot of those stratagems, because you're not selecting a unit to fight, you're just fighting on death, they get around those. So there's some really interesting stuff there. Other really noteworthy stratagems are moving through enemy models. This is really good on 8-bound because one of the biggest problems that world leaders have is getting move blocked. You know, when people put a line of cultists or a line of guardsmen or, you know, something like that out, and all of a sudden you have to move all the way around them to charge the main thing that you want. Being able to just go, no, I'm just going to move straight over the top. It really just dials up the potential for this detachment to do heavy damage, right? And then the last noteworthy stratagem is one where it's basically at the opponent's command phase, they take a battle shock test at -1 for every unit that's engaged with one of your 8-bound units. So you can take a unit of 6 with the character attached, so 7 bodies. You can send that out and try to tag multiple things. Like you put the 6-inch pylon and consolidate, you attack something, then you consolidate after fighting, and you tag 3 or 4 different things. And then when it ticks over into your opponent's command phase, all of those units have to take a battle shock test at -1. That can be really effective. It's a good way to flip primary. It's a good way to prevent your opponent from utilizing stratagems that might be a big problem for you. There's tons of really cool things you can do there with that stratagem. So let's jump over now and have a look at an example list for the Possessed Slaughterband. Alrighty, here's our list for the Possessed Slaughterband. So we've got 3 Slaughterband models. One of them has the Frenzied Focus, which is the critical 5-up enhancement. And then basically you're going to attach these 3 guys to 3 units. We've got 2 units of 3 regular 8-bound. They're not going to have a character attached. Then we've got 1 unit of 6 8-bound. And then 2 units of 6 Exalted 8-bound. So that's your 3 characters going to attach. Now, the one that has the critical 5+, you're basically going to attach him to either 8-bound or Exalted 8-bound, depending on the matchup. If you're playing into mech-heavy lists with lots of tanks, and you really want those Exalted 8-bound to do their work, you attach him to them. So thinking Imperial Knights, Imperial Guard with all their tanks, that sort of stuff. But if you're versing something that's a little bit more combined arms, or if you're versing something that's got heavy infantry, then you're going to want to attach him to the 8-bound unit. But either way, all 3 of these big units are going to have that Slaughterband attached, which means you can resurrect models, you can get additional damage, etc. Then we round the list out with 2 Forge Fiends. These guys are really good at providing that fire support to make sure that you soften those targets up on the way in, and also it can shoot things off of an objective over there while your rest of your army goes and fights something over here, allowing you to engage your opponent on all fronts. We've got a Hellbrute. I think every list needs at least one to be able to rapid ingress him, charge, and hopefully clear a flank with his infinite fights. If you want a little bit more information on that, check the strategy video that I did, Hellbrute Masterclass. I'll put links in the description. And then we round the list out with a single unit of Jackals. They're there to hold your home, sticky that, screen it out, prevent your opponent from deep striking behind you. As a combat army, one of the last things you want is to push your army up into the middle and then have your opponent drop behind you, and then they basically get to sandwich you. That's the last thing you want. So you want to have those Jackals in there, the Hellbrute, the Forge Fiends, and then basically just going heavy on those 8-bound bodies. It's worth noting that in this detachment, all of those 8-bound essentially get a Blood Surge move as well, so there's a lot of utility there. There's a very, very cool army. Alrighty, so with all that being said, where does Possessed Slaughterband fit on our detachment tier list? So it's a really interesting detachment. I think it's going to be a ton of fun. However, I think it falls into that solid B tier faction. Now, it's worth noting the description of the tiers. D tier basically means I can't see this winning pretty much any games in competitive 40k. C tier means it might win, 1 or 2 games in a 5-round event. B tier means it's probably going to go either 3, like 3 wins, 2 losses is probably where the B tier factions are going to sit. And this is all under the understanding that, it's an incompetent player against competent players, like a like for like. The detachment itself is going to fit in that sort of general area. And then A tier is something that's going to go 4-1. S tier is something that has the capacity to go undefeated. So that's sort of how I've broken the tiers down. And I think with all of that being said, the Slaughterband is somewhere in that B tier range. It's good, it's strong, but it has some very identifiable weaknesses, and competent players are going to exploit that, which means that you're probably only going to win 3 out of 5 games if you run the Slaughterband. So with that being said, let's jump into the next detachment, which is the Vessels of Wrath. Now, the Vessels of Wrath's been out for a while now, but it's worth discussing because it is still one of the options we have available to us. So, this detachment, in my opinion, is all about having big, chunky units, because they get the blessings, additional blessings roll, so you can make one of them a Vessels of Wrath, and then that whole unit gains that additional benefit. So having bigger units gets the most mileage out of the detachment rule. And basically they have tough to shift with shooting and reactive blood surge are the 2 of the defining traits of this detachment. So if you want to play a big tough units that are hard to shift, like if you were familiar with the old Exalted 8-bound bricks, that sort of play style, then the Vessels of Wrath is the way to go. Their best enhancements are, there's one where you generate a command point on a CP roll of 3+, when an enemy unit is destroyed. That's pretty cool. There's one that allows you to fight on death on a 2+. That's pretty cool. And then the main one is that you can have, on a Demon Prince, you can give him the ability to walk through walls. Now that's really, really good. Enemy models and walls. So you're kind of giving your foot-slogging Demon Prince, you're kind of giving him fly, which is really, really good. And that's one of the defining things in this detachment, in my opinion. And then as for noteworthy stratagems, we've got one that allows you to reroll wounds against monsters and vehicles. This is obviously very good if you're running those things like Terminators and whatever that are going to be hitting at strength 8 and you want to dial up that damage a bit, or even your 8-bound strength 8, you want to dial that damage up a little bit if you're going into, toughness 11 or 12 vehicles. Being able to wound on 5s with rerolls makes you significantly more likely to do that necessary damage. One of the other noteworthy stratagems is that you can force a desperate escape on non-monster, non-vehicle units when they fall back. So, similar to the previous detachment where you want to basically use your 6-inch consolidate to fight something and then tag a whole bunch of stuff, it's similar with this. And this time, when they go to fall back, if they roll a 1, 2, or a 3, and you're a Vessels of Wrath, those models die. So that's a very, very effective way of dealing damage to your opponent and disincentivizing them from falling back. And if they don't fall back, that means they stay in combat with you, which means they can't shoot you, and that's a really effective way of protecting your units. So again, leaning into that sort of tough, hard to shift with shooting kind of detachment. The next one is Blood Surge on your big Terminator units or your 8-bound. So I know that the Possessed Slaughterband, that has Blood Surge built in for all your 8-bound. This one is a stratagem, which is not as good, but you can use it on things like Terminators, which is really, really good. The Terminators are way better than 8-bound in a few ways. One of them is that there's 10 of them. And being able to Blood Surge on a 10-man unit is way better than doing it on a 6-man unit. So that's really cool. And then the last one is -1 to wound in the shooting phase. So again, this leans into the Detachment's sort of playstyle, which is tough units that are really good at beating shooting armies. So if your local area is full of like guard, or Tau, and they just keep shooting you and killing you, and you're struggling with that, this detachment is really good at countering that shooting dominance by going, cool, well, we're going to hit wound in the shooting phase. Oh, if you shoot us, we're going to Blood Surge move into you. Oh, we're going to charge you and we're going to tag you, and if you go to fall back so that you can shoot us, you're going to die. And if you stay in combat, you're going to die. The Vessels of Wrath is really good at dominating those shooting matchups. But with that being said, let's have a look at a Vessels of Wrath list that I've written for you guys. We've got a Demon Prince here. He's got Gateways to Glory, which is going to allow him to walk through walls. We've got a Slaughterband with Arc Slaughterer, which is going to bump up his damage output. We've got a Slaughterband with the Avenger's Crown as well in here. And then we have a unit of 10 Chaos Terminators. Now, these guys lean into the Detachment's playstyle very well, in that they're tough. They're tougher than 8-bound now because they've got the 2-up save, the 4-up invulnerable save, and they no longer have to contest with Exalted 8-bounds Feel No Pain. They're just straight up tougher than they were before. And also, these Terminators, they used to have an ability that gave them +1 to hit if they were below starting strength, +1 to wound if they were below half strength. Well, now, if they're near a unit of 8-bound, they get that +1 to hit from the start. They don't require any casualties, which makes this unit much more effective as a rapid ingress threat that just rapid ingresses somewhere safe, then moves out and charges the opponent. And it's also worth noting that they have the +2 move from the previous Blessings rule built into their data sheet now, so they're moving 7 inches, and they get reroll charges and reroll shooting against the closest enemy unit. So if there's something big on an objective somewhere and you just rapid ingress these guys safe, they move out, they move 7 inches, then they get to shoot at it with reroll wounds, and if they fail to kill it, they can charge it with reroll charges, and then if there's the 8-bound nearby, they're going to be hitting on 2s with all those power fists. So the Terminators, in my opinion, in this detachment got significantly better than the previous book. We've also got 2 big units of 8-bound here. This is where your 2 Slaughterband are going to go, and you're basically going to have these 3 big combat bricks, all of which are quite tough and have a lot of utility in the term of Blood Surge moves, in the term of tagging multiple enemy units, forcing them to take Desperate Escape when they fall back. Some really effective stuff there. And then to activate them, we've got a couple of Forge Fiends here and a couple of Hellbrutes. You're going to see these guys in every list. It doesn't necessarily require too much explanation for why these guys are so good. The Forge Fiends have great shooting. They're good at clearing your opponent's screens, which allows you to get your big combat units into where they need to go. And they also are a tough piece that can sit on an objective somewhere, and you're not too mad if all they're doing is providing a little bit of firepower from range. Then you got the 2 Hellbrutes. These guys, again, are great for rapid ingressing, great for clearing an entire flank, really reliable with those multiple fights. And then we round the list out with a single unit of Jackals. They're there to sticky your home objective, screen out your backfield. So that's my take on a Vessels of Wrath list. Alright, so with all of that being said, where does Vessels of Wrath fit on our detachment tier list? I think it's a solid C. It's probably high upper C, maybe lower B. I think the Vessels of Wrath is largely just outshone by some of the other detachments. I think the other detachments do kind of what Vessels of Wrath does, but better. So I think, realistically, people are very unlikely to select the Vessels of Wrath. The main time that you're going to want to play these guys is if most of the opponents you come up to regularly are shooting you off the table and you're really struggling with that, and you just want tougher units that have some utility in the shooting matchup. That's the main time when you might lean into a Vessels of Wrath list. So that's Vessels of Wrath. Let's jump on to the next detachment. Alright, next up we have the Berzerker Warband. Now this is your index detachment, however there have been significant changes to it that I think have pretty dramatically impacted its playstyle. So let's have a look. The playstyle, I would call this a versatility and reliability playstyle. This is something where you want a detachment that can kind of do a little bit of everything quite well, and has a lot of things built in to remove variance from the game. So It's got a lot of damage buffs. It's also got a lot of damage reduction. And there's a lot of different units work. You know, like the Possessed Slaughterband unit, that detachment, that one really only works with Possessed, you know. The Goretrack Detachment, it really only works when you've got lots of transports. Whereas the Berzerker Warband kind of allows you to take a little bit of everything, and everything benefits. Like, it's a very varied sort of playstyle. The best enhancements in this detachment are the -1 damage on a Demon Prince. That makes him ridiculously tough when he's got the Lone Op and those sorts of things as well. And then the Berzerker's Glaive for the +1 attack, +1 strength, damage, sorry. That's really good on a Slaughterband. You know, it just makes his damage go up. That turn that he goes Super Saiyan with extra attacks, going with 3 damage, is very effective. There's some noteworthy stratagems that really help define this detachment and its playstyle. One of them is Advance and Charge on Berzerkers. Now, this is when I was talking about the versatility and reliability component. Being able to just go, cool, I've got some Berzerkers and a Rhino here, and instead of like hoping that you're going to be able to get your opponent close enough or hoping that you roll big on your charges, being able to add Advance and Charge just means that you're disembarking out, you're getting the +2 because the data sheet for Berzerkers went up 2, so you're getting that built in, you're advancing and charging, and it's going to allow you to threaten deeper into your opponent's lines, or more likely is it's going to allow you to be very confident that you will make those shorter charges, because you're essentially getting a 3d6 charge, because instead of just rolling, you know, moving out your 8 inches and then charging from there, you're moving out 8 inches, then you get to advance d6 and then charge 2d6, so it's kind of like getting a 3d6 charge. Other noteworthy strats are +1 AP, and this can be used on any unit in melee, and it lasts for the entire phase. So I talked about this in my Hellbrute video, but this stratagem is broken on a Hellbrute because every time he fights, he gets that +1 AP. But it's also really good on things like Khorne Berserkers who are only AP 1, things like 8-bound who are AP 2. If you're going into somebody who has Armor of Contempt, it can be a bit of a problem. So being able to put that on there, again, it just builds into that reliability component of this detachment. You can also put -1 damage on any unit, and again, that lasts for the entire phase. Fantastic on Hellbrutes because they're going to get hit multiple times. In fact, you want them to get hit multiple times. So being able to put that -1 damage on, very, very effective. But it's also just really good on your units of 8-bound, your Demon Princes, those sorts of things, because it's worth noting that these do stack. So if you've got a Demon Prince who has -1 damage as a enhancement, and then somebody hits you with a 3 damage weapon, you can put a further -1 damage on, and now that 3 damage weapon is only doing 1 damage. You know, and all of a sudden that Demon Prince is just unkillable. So that's really, really effective. And then the other one is their sticky objectives on death. So this is the same way, more or less, as it worked in the previous rules, where when you die, if you're holding an objective, that objective remains under your control until somebody else takes it from you. And again, builds into that versatility and that reliability. You know, you're on an objective, if you get killed off it, you know what, you're so reliable that you're still holding the objective because you spend the command point to hold it, right? So it just really builds into that theme of this detachment is you're just quite reliable. There's another one that I haven't written down here, which is that the Blood Surge move, you have the capacity to spend a CP to auto-8 the Blood Surge, which makes it really reliable. The reason that I haven't put that in here is because from a competitive standpoint, Blood Surge kind of isn't real. You know, more often than not, because you can only do it once, your opponent just goes, oh cool, I'll stay 9 inches away from you, and I'll shoot you. And now it doesn't matter if you Blood Surge, because you're just going to get closer to them, and then they're going to shoot you with something else, and you can't Blood Surge a second time. So, even with the auto-8, it's not super reliable. It's a bit of a gotcha moment, which works on less experienced players, but it doesn't necessarily work in a tournament setting. And even when you do connect, even if you do connect with a Blood Surge, because you haven't charged that turn, those Khorne Berserkers are Strength 4, you know, AP 1, 1 damage. Like, they're very soft. So even Blood Surging into something, chances are you're not going to kill it anyway. So it's not a super reliable strategy. So that's why I haven't mentioned it here as one of the noteworthy stratagems. However, I did talk about it for longer than I talked about the other stratagems, so maybe it was noteworthy. But anyway, with all that being said, let's have a look at a Berzerker Warband list. Let's pull up the Berzerker Warband. Now, this list is probably one of my favorite lists. It's got Khorne the Betrayer. I think he's one of the best units in the book. He's only 85 points. He provides a realistic buff for those Berserkers, rerolling 1s to hit and wound. And he also just hits like a freight train himself, particularly in the Berzerker Warband detachment. The +2 strength is really, really valuable on Khorne the Betrayer. And then we've got a unit of 10 Khorne Berserkers for him to lead, and a Rhino for them to ride inside. Then we have 3 Chaos Spawn. We have 3 units of 3 8-bound, 3 Forge Fiends, all with Ectoplasma, a single unit of Goremongers, 3 Hellbrutes, all with their hammers and fists, and then a single unit of Jackals. I call this one the Hellforge list because it's got 3 Hellbrutes and 3 Forge Fiends, so I call it Hellforge. And I think this list is probably one of the most powerful ways to play World Eaters. We'll get into that when we talk tier lists. But as you can see, this is what I mean by versatility and reliability. It's got a lot of versatility in that you've got like some AP1 bulk attacks, you know, with Khorne and his unit, but then you've also got some mid-strength AP2, you know, AP1 2 damage attacks. You've got some even higher strength, you know, attacks with the 8-bound, and you got even higher strengths again with your Hellbrute. So you got lots of variation in the amount of damage that you can do, and then you've also got a lot of variation in your defensive profiles. And you've got Jackals, which are, you know, weak, easy to kill. You got Berserkers, slightly harder to kill. You got Spawn, slightly harder to kill. You got 8-bound, even harder to kill. Then you've got Hellbrutes, even harder to kill again. And then you got Forge Fiends, the hardest thing in the list to kill. So you've got this like granular nature of, you know, durability, and that versatility in the hands of a talented player. You can use it to go, oh cool, that thing over there that's really ineffective, like something that doesn't kill very good, I'm going to put my thing that's easy to kill into them, and now they're neutralized. And that thing over there that kills things really, really well, I'm going to put this really tough unit into it and neutralize them as well. And that's really effective. Or, depending on your opponent, depending on the situation, you can do the inverse of that. We can go, oh, that thing's really, really effective at killing things, so I'm going to throw something into it that's easy to kill, so it doesn't really matter that you're effective at killing things. And that thing over there that's really weak and struggles to kill things, I'm going to throw my Spawn into it. Because, you know, even with 5 rounds of combat, you're not going to kill my Spawn, and I'm going to tie you up there for the rest of the game. So having that versatility allows you to play that playstyle and allows you to utilize different tools for different situations. And that, I think, is where the Berzerker Warband shines, is that it's got that versatility and reliability. Alrighty, so with all of that being said, where does the Berzerker Warband fit on my faction tier list, my detachment tier list? So I think that the Berzerker Warband is an A tier, solid A tier. I reckon you can win a tournament with this. You will pretty regularly go 3-2 or 4-1 with the Berzerker Warband. It's got all of the tools, it's got all of the reliability. You're much less likely to get diced. You're much less likely to be like, oh, I just got unlucky in that game, because you have all of that reliability and versatility. And the fact that it gets the most out of almost every unit in the book means it's very easy to write multiple different variations of a list, and all of them are going to perform quite well. So, big fan of the Berzerker Warband, solid A tier. Let's get into the next detachment, shall we? Alright, next up we have the Goretrack Onslaught. Now this detachment I think is going to be a ton of fun, and I think a lot of people are going to get a lot of enjoyment out of playing this detachment. And I would say that the archetype or the detachment playstyle for this is maneuverability and tricks. So if you're into those games where you're playing a very technical, high-level game where you're reacting to things and you're doing different tactics and strategy, and you're into that style of play, as opposed to like brute force, or as opposed to like damage absorption and attrition, if you really like the tricks and stuff like that, then I would say Goretrack is for you. It's got a lot of high speed units, it's got a lot of OC, and it's got lots of reactive moves and gotchas. There's lots of things where your opponent's they have a plan, they think it's going to work, and then you go, nope, I have a trick for that. You know, that's what Goretrack's all about. So if that's the play style that you like, then I think Goretrack is the direction you should take. The best enhancements are, there's a Scout 9 inches that you can put on a Master of Executions. You put him with some Berserkers inside a Rhino, and turn 1 you send that down the line. So that's really effective. And then the other one is Fights First, which can go on a Master of Executions in a Berserker unit, or what I think is the better way to play it is to put it on a Slaughterband, so that you can give a big unit of 8-bound Fights First. So that's really cool. There's a few noteworthy stratagems for the Goretrack Onslaught. One of them is that you can embark after fighting, which means you can have your berserkers, you can move your transport up, you can disembark, you can fight something and then re-embark in the transport, which makes it very difficult for your opponent to deal with your units. Often in otherworldly detachments, you're going to like take Khorne and his unit, you're going to disembark from your Rhino, you're going to go out, you're going to charge something, but now you're exposed, you're out in the open. Whereas now what you can do is you can basically disembark Khorne, go out, charge something, then also send the Rhino over. The Rhino might charge the same target, and now all your berserkers are within range of that Rhino, so at the end of the fight phase they can re-embark, and now people can't just shoot Khorne's unit dead. So that's a really, really effective stratagem. Another one is vehicles moving through walls. You know, obviously very good on a Rhino, being able to move through the walls and then disembark you guys where you need to. Makes your units lots faster, hence the maneuverability and the playstyle. But it's also really good on a Hellbrute, because it's any vehicle. So you can now rapid ingress that Hellbrute somewhere behind a wall where he's safe, he can't get shot. And then in your turn, you can move straight through that wall that you just ingress behind and then go and charge something. So it activates the Hellbrute a lot as well. And that's another one where it's like a maneuverability trick. That if your opponent's not paying attention, they might think that where your Rhino is, your guys are going to have to get out and go around this way because blah, blah, blah. And then you just go, no, I'm actually just going to move straight through the wall. You can also use it on a Forge Fiend. Makes it much harder for your opponent to plan on where to go, because if you've got a Forge Fiend somewhere, normally they would go, cool, you can either move that way or that way, but in Goretrack you can also move that way and move straight through the wall, making it much harder for your opponent to plan out their movement phase, because your movement phase has an extra element to it. There's also another one, which is vehicles can reactively move 6 inches after being shot. This is really good on a Forge Fiend because it's a shooting unit. You can pop out, shoot your opponent, and then they'll line up a bunch of stuff to shoot you back. The first thing shoots you, and then you just reactively move out of line of sight. And now your opponent's like, oh no, I'd lined everything up to shoot that unit. And this is what I mean by they've got lots of reactive moves and gotchas. Is one of the main things about this sort of detachment, is one of the ways you're going to play it. You can also do cute things like they shoot your Rhino then reactively moves forward, and you gain 6 inches worth of movement, because then in your next turn from that position you're able to move forward and do more damage. So the reactive move, really, really cool. There's another one that's disembark after you move with your Khorne berserkers. Now this one's pretty obvious on its face. Your berserkers have an 8-inch move, but instead you can move the Rhino 12 inches and then disembark, so you gain 4 inches worth of movement. And then the last noteworthy stratagem is a 6-inch disembark into engagement range. Few small things about this one. One of them is that you can disembark directly into engagement range, which is normally not what you want to do, because your opponent then gets to fight first, because it's an ongoing combat. Because your berserkers didn't declare a charge, they disembark directly into combat. Your opponent gets to fight first. However, there are some scenarios where you might want to do this. You know, it prevents heroic interventions, for example, because your berserkers don't have to declare a charge; they're just in engagement range, so your opponent can't heroic in. There's also things like being able to position the models exactly where you want, because when you make a charge move, of course, you have to end with as many models in base contact as you can, whereas this stratagem doesn't have that. So if your opponent has a big unit strung out and there's a character on one end, you can just disembark all you guys on this end, and then even though they're going to fight first, that character is not going to be able to make any attacks. So you can do some really tricky stuff with that that stratagem. And one of the last things to note on that stratagem is that a lot of reactive moves are not triggered by a unit that disembarks from a transport. So you can basically disembark within 6 inches and then charge from there and not trigger their reactive moves. Now, make sure you check the wording on that, because it varies from stratagem to stratagem, so ask your opponent at the start of the game how their reactive moves work specifically, but it is a tricky way that you can get around that. Alright, let's have a look at an example of a list for the Goretrack Onslaught. Alrighty, Goretrack Onslaught. Here we have it. So we've got Khorne the Betrayer as our warlord. Like I said in the Berzerker Warband detachment, I think Khorne the Betrayer is fantastic. We also have a Master of Executions with aggressive deployment to give you that scout move. And we have a Slaughterband with his Infernal Infusion, which is giving him the fights first. Backing them up, we have 2 units of Khorne Berzerkers, obviously one for Khorne, one for your Master of Executions, and then we have 2 Rhinos for those guys to go inside. We also have a Chaos Land Raider, which is my spicy pick, and basically it has a transport capacity of 14, which allows you to take either a unit of 8 bound or Exalted 8-bound with a character attached and put them inside the Land Raider. Now, that Slaughterband with the Fights First enhancement is either going to go in the unit of 8-bound or the Exalted 8-bound, depending on your opponent. If you're playing somebody who's got a lot of mech and a lot of vehicles, you might want to put him in the Exalted 8-bound, because that way that Exalted 8-bound unit gets Fights First, and that Exalted 8-bound unit also gets, the ability to resurrect models when they die. So keeps their longevity up. But if you're versing somebody who's like infantry heavy, well, then you attach the character to your 8-bound. Now, the 8-bound are going to go inside the Land Raider in most games, and they're basically going to be able to jump out of the Land Raider, attack something, and then after fighting, jump back in the Land Raider, which makes them really, really hard to crack. One of the things about the 8-bound and the Exalted is they're nowhere near as tough as they used to be, but being able to jump back in that Land Raider makes them tougher. The other thing worth noting with the Exalted 8-bound, there's a really cool trick, and I might do a separate video breaking down this trick and getting some models out on the table and giving you guys a practical example. But if you have that unit of Exalted 8-bound with the Fights First Slaughterband attached, that unit can now be in Deep Strike and threaten to rapid ingress and heroically intervene and then Fights First, which is a really crazy combo. So say you have some Goremongers on the central objective, right? And it's turn 2, and your opponent goes, their Blood Angels player or something like that, and they go, cool, we're going to send something out to charge you and kill those Goremongers, right? So they move their unit out, then you rapid ingress the Exalted 8-bound right behind your Goremongers, and now if your opponent charges the Goremongers, you can then heroically intervene with the 8-bound, with the Exalted 8-bound, fight first, kill that unit of Blood Angels that just charged, and now, not only did you save your Goremongers, but you've now positioned your Exalted 8-bound in the middle of the board, ready to next turn spring off and go and attack something else. So that's a really neat trick that you can do with your Exalted 8-bound, with the rapid ingress, heroically intervene, Fights First. But if you're against somebody who's heavy infantry, you're probably going to want to put him in the 8-bound anyway, because then he gains all of the benefits of being in the 8-bound unit. So you'll have to pick that matchup by matchup, which is a really fun and exciting way to play the game. It's not just telegraphed like everything else. We then wrap this up with a unit of Goremongers, a single Hellbrute with a fist and hammer, and then 2 units of Jackals. Now you might be wondering why I have 2 units of Jackals, isn't that redundancy? Don't Jackals just sit there and hold you home? And all of that is true. However, in the Goretrack Onslaught, it's worth noting that Jackals can get inside of your Rhinos. So your Rhinos go forward and your Berserkers disembark and your Berserkers are out there doing your damage. But then basically, once you've stickied an objective, you can then throw your Jackals inside those Rhinos. And now, people can't just pick up your Jackals with throwaway shooting. And if people do go near your Rhinos, you can reactively disembark the Jackals with the Rhinos' new datasheet ability. And that gives you huge amounts of objective control. And it gives you a huge way to protect these assets. So that's why we've got 2 units of Jackals in this list. Now, this list, I think it's going to do a lot less damage than some of the other versions, especially with the lack of Forge Fiends, only a single Hellbrute, and you're really leaning into those AP1 Khorne Berserkers, and there's no real ways to buff that. So it's going to do a lot less damage, but I think the amount of tricks that this detachment has is going to greatly make up for that. The maneuverability and the speed really does make this a problem for a lot of people, and you do still have a little bit of shooting. The Land Raider actually puts out a ridiculous amount of shooting, much more than what we're used to. So when you think Land Raider and you think shooting, you think 4 las cannon shots. Well, if this guy's within rapid fire range, he's going to get 8 las cannon shots. Yeah, he's only hitting on 4s, but that means on average dice, you're going to get 4 hits. A normal Land Raider only has 4 shots. So a normal Land Raider would need to get 100% hit rate just to match your average. So the Chaos Land Raider in a World Eater's army actually does a lot of shooting. And it's also worth noting, it can move through walls, which is kind of cute. You can have the Land Raider hidden behind a ruin somewhere, and then you can go, cool, it's going to move through walls, it's going to move up its 10, then the 8-bound are going to disembark, then they're going to go charge something, then it's going to charge the same thing, and then they're going to jump back inside the Land Raider, and then in the next turn, your opponent goes to shoot the Land Raider, and it reactively moves and hides behind something. Like, there's so many tricks you can do with this. So, if you're into that sort of tricky kind of, reactive, responsive sort of playstyle, then I think Goretrack Onslaught's for you. Alrighty, so let's have a look at our detachment leaderboard, and let's have a look at where the Goretrack Onslaught fits in to our tier list. And in my opinion, it's a solid upper B tier detachment. It lacks damage, but it has tons of tricks, tons of objective control, and some really, really powerful tricks such as rapid ingressing fight first with 8-bound, such as disembarking, killing something, then re-embarking at transport. Those sorts of things can absolutely flip games, and are even top players really struggle to play against them. So I think the Goretrack Onslaught is one of the better detachments that we have available to us, and I think people are going to start putting up some really solid results on it. But with all of that being said, let's get into our last detachment. Alright, lucky last, we have the Khorne Daemonkin. This detachment is one that I am a huge fan of. I've been a fan of Khorne Daemonkin since their inception back in 7th edition, and it's really glad to see them back. But let's take a look at the playstyle of Khorne Daemonkin and decide whether or not it would be suitable for you to play. So, the way I see the Khorne Daemonkin as a playstyle is it's one that has lots of auras and combos, lots of proximity requirements, like you've got to be near friendly units to achieve certain things and to be able to access certain stratagems, but there are really strong rewards for pulling off of those combos. There's also some very high level tricks and gotchas and combos that are, in the hands of a master are going to be absolutely devastating for your opponent. So if you really are interested in putting in the reps and really, really mastering these tricks, the Khorne Daemonkin is going to be a very rewarding detachment to play. Their best enhancements are that you can get blessings on a Khorne Daemonkin unit within 6 inches. So you've got your World Eaters units, and then you've got your Khorne Demons. The Khorne Demons don't normally have your blessings of Khorne, but if you take this enhancement, anybody within 6 inches can, which means sustained hits, which means 6-inch pile and consolidate, which means lethal hits, etc. There's also an enhancement that allows you to attach a Chaos Lord riding a Juggernaut to a unit of Blood Crushers. This is so cool, so thematic, and also very strong, because the very fact that he's attached to the unit means that that whole unit gains blessings. So this is really, really good in that regard, and he also provides all of his aura abilities to those Blood Crushers. The next, we have an enhancement for +1 attack, strength, and damage, which is really, really good. And also, when you kill a unit with this model, you automatically generate a Blood Tithe point. So, just helps out a lot with the core of this list. Now, some of the noteworthy stratagems. The first one is that you can summon Bloodletters on the kill. Now, this single stratagem, I reckon I could talk about for 2 hours. There's so many different uses for this, but the main thing to note is that it's when any unit, friend or foe, dies. Before removing the last model, you can take one of your units of Bloodletters that's in reserves, and you can set it up anywhere within 9 inches of that model, provided you're not within engagement range of an enemy unit. Now, there's a few cases that I think jump straight out at me, but like I said, I think we could go on about this for hours. One of them is that if you've got a couple of spawns sitting on an objective and your opponent charges you and kills you in the fight phase, well, then you remove the last model, it's the fight phase. You can then drop 10 OC on the objective that they just tried to charge you off. And because it's the fight phase, they can't declare any further charges, and there's not much they can do. So they're not going to be able to attack those Bloodletters. It's not like killing something in the shooting phase, and then you also have your charge phase to do damage. Like, this is the end of the turn, the end of the fight phase. So being able to drop your Bloodletters on the objective just means it's going to be really hard for combat armies to push the Khorne Daemonkin off of those primary objectives. Every time they try and punch something off an objective, all they're doing is summoning Bloodletters. So that's really annoying and really, really powerful. Another one is that if your opponent's setting up screens, they might have a screen of units like this, and then all of their juicy stuff back here, and you bring out a couple Forge Fiends, you shoot one of those juicy targets, kill it, and then you can summon Bloodletters behind their screens and then charge all the stuff that they were trying to protect. That's bonkers. That is so bonkers. And it's going to be really hard for your opponent to prevent that. They need to keep everything hidden where you can't see anything, because if you can kill something with those Forge Fiends, you're going to be able to get Bloodletters in their backfield really early in the game. So that's really annoying, which means your opponent has to hide, they have to clump up behind ruins, and that makes them super vulnerable to a lot of things. And it also just means it's really hard for them to control objective markers. Like, how do they control objectives without presenting any targets? That's really hard to do. And even if they put something out onto the middle and you go, cool, Forge Fiends come out, shoot that thing in the middle, then 9 inches closer to your opponent, you drop Bloodletters, and then you're charging from there. Even in those case scenarios, you're very likely to be getting Bloodletters into your opponent's backfield in really, really impactful ways. So I might save some stuff there and talk about that detachment. I'll do a full breakdown on it, stratagem, because it's out of this world crazy. Some of the other stratagems that they do have, however, is one that gives you Lance or Twin Linked on a World Eaters unit within 6 inches of a demon. That's really, really powerful. There's another one that allows you to gain D3 Blood Tithe points and activate one of those abilities immediately when you kill an enemy character or monster. It's quite good. There's another one that allows you to resurrect Bloodletters, Fleshhounds, or Blood Crushers. You're almost always going to be using this to resurrect a Blood Crusher. For 1 CP to bring a Blood Crusher back is really, really good. And then the other one is Uppy Downy on a Demon's unit. So at the end of the fight phase, you pick the unit up and then it goes into reserves, and then next turn you drop it again. So that's really effective as well. So worth noting on that one is that you can start with a Bloodletter unit on the table, and then if your opponent gets the first turn, at the end of their first turn, you can pick up that Bloodletter unit and it goes into strategic reserves. And that means in your first turn, you could, in your movement phase, just deep strike that Bloodletter unit. Because it started on the table, it's not held to the same restrictions about what turns they can come in. So you can pick it up and you can throw it in turn 1, or you leave it in reserves, shoot something, and then go in and charge. So there's some really cool stuff you can do with that Uppy Downy Demons unit. And it's also worth noting that in the Khorne Daemonkin detachment, it's the only one that allows you to take demons, and Fleshhounds have inbuilt Uppy Downy and are a very, very points effective unit for the World Eaters. So let's have a look at a Khorne Daemonkin list. Alrighty, let's pull up the Khorne Daemonkin list that I've prepared for you guys. This one has a Demon Prince with the Blade of Endless Bloodshed, so he's the high damage output Demon Prince. We've got a Lord on a Juggernaut with the Disciples of Khorne. That's going to allow him to attach to a unit of Juggernauts. And then we have Scarbrand. Now, one of the reasons you want Scarbrand is because he adds +1 attack to all nearby Khorne demons, which is going to affect your Bloodletters, which means when you are summoning them, you're doing way more damage, and also dials up the damage on that Juggernaut unit, the Blood Crusher unit. We have 3 units of Bloodletters. I think you want minimum 3 in any Khorne Daemonkin, because the stratagem you're looking to get the most abuse out of here is that summoned by a Slaughter and bringing in those Bloodletters. We have a unit of 6 Blood Crushers here, which is the one that the Chaos Lord attaches to. We've got a unit of Spawn. We've got 2 units of Fleshhounds here. These guys are really good for your trading early game, objectives, actions, that sort of stuff. And they also have Uppy Downy, so they're really good for that. We've got 3 Forge Fiends. They're there to kill things, unlock that summoned by Slaughter, and also just doing general damage, clearing screens, that sort of stuff. We've got a Hellbrute. He's there to rapid ingress, as always, and try to activate that multiple fights. And then your standard unit of Jackals, which is there to hold your backfield and sticky objectives, etc. So this one's probably the most unique of all of the list because it has all of those demon elements, but it does still have elements that we're familiar with. It's got your Hellbrutes, it's got your Forge Fiends, it's got your Jackals, it's got a lot of the sort of components that you're really familiar with. The main difference is it's going to have the big monster like Scarbrand. It's got Bloodletters, which are 90-point trade-away units that are really effective at trading up and killing small things. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff going for this detachment, and that Blood Crusher unit is absolutely insane. The amount of damage that it puts out is phenomenal, and it's quite tough in return as well. This makes for a very interesting list. Alright, so now we've discussed the Khorne Daemonkin list, but where does it fit on our detachment tier list? I think you guys can guess where it's going to go, and that is in S tier. I think we've already seen a lot of results come in with Khorne Daemonkin doing really, really dominant in tournaments. I think Khorne Daemonkin has a lot of raw power, a lot of tricks, a lot of durability. It's kind of got a little bit of everything, whereas other detachments lean heavily into tricks or heavily into damage, whereas the Khorne Daemonkin kind of does all of it. And some of the stuff that it does better than anybody else. Its tricks are better than anybody else's tricks. Sometimes its damage is better than anybody else's damage. You know, there's a lot of things going on here. So I'm a huge fan of the Khorne Daemonkin. I think it's going to be one of those ones that's going to be in the hands of a talented player. It's going to be absolutely terrifying. Maybe more notably is that in games where your opponent is a little bit less experienced, they're going to really feel that skill difference. When they kill something and then you summon Bloodletters onto the objective, and then you flip the objective and then it goes over into your turn, and then you go in and charge something and flip another objective, and then all of a sudden you've created like a 15 to 20 point swing in victory points, your opponent's just going to really be like, whoa, 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 I'm being outclassed here. And this detachment unlocks that and gives you the capacity to do that. Whereas other detachments, it's a lot harder to really flex those muscles. So I think a lot of more competitive players will be leaning on the Khorne Daemonkin as a competitive list. I think that it's between that and the Berzerker Warband as far as I'm concerned. And the other detachments, there's nothing wrong with them. They're still a ton of fun. But I don't think they're going to be able to compete with Khorne Daemonkin and the Berzerker Warband as it stands based on current points in the current meta. So there's a lot of things that could change there. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, that is the World Eaters detachment tier list, and also advice on where you should start collecting World Eaters. You will have noticed that in these videos there was a lot of units that were repeated. So if you're starting World Eaters, I would recommend grabbing those models first. Grab a couple Forge Fiends, grab a couple Hellbrutes, grab a unit of Berserkers with Khorne, because you would notice that they're in most of the lists. And then you can sort of, as you're playing, you can sort of tweak around that, and you can start adding other elements to lean more into the Khorne Daemonkin, or lean more into the Warband, or lean more into the Goretrack. Like, you can do that sort of stuff, but you'll notice there's a pretty consistent core of units here that are more or less very strong in every detachment. So that would be my advice to newer players that are looking to get into the World Eaters, and sort of then figure out which one of these play styles they enjoy the most. And then once you've figured out what play style you enjoy, you then flesh out the rest of the list in that direction. So that would be my advice for, people learning to find their feet on World Eaters, and that's where we're at as a faction. Alrighty guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, like, subscribe, all that good shit. Head over to blogforthebloodgod.com, where you can show your support for the channel in numerous ways, one of which is by joining our Patreon and Discord community, where I'll write lists with you, I'll prepare you for upcoming tournaments by coaching you and going through all of the different things that you need to know so that you can get the most enjoyment and the best results possible out of that event. So that's a lot of the stuff we do over in the Discord. We also just have a ripper community there. We share memes, we share hobby updates, we have a good laugh, and we have a lot of fun together. So if you want to be a part of that, head over to blogforthebloodgod.com, where you can find links to our Patreon and our Discord, and you can join us there. And as always, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Let me know if you disagree with that tier list order, or if you disagree with anything that I said about any of those detachments, or if there's anything in there that you didn't factor in that you found quite interesting. Let me know. We'll have a conversation in the comment section below. And yeah, with all that being said, I'm going to leave it here. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.
Look for the Blood God.